Hello everyone, and welcome to the Synology Partner Online Training. We have an awesome topic for everyone here today, going over some tips and tricks for how to secure your Synology NAS. Now keep in mind, before we dive into the topics here today, these different tips that we're going to be providing today and how to do them are not a one-size-fits-all solution. Now you might be in some sort of organization or in a certain type of vertical that has different compliance or policy rules that would change some of these settings. But oftentimes, for most users, you're going to want to set up at least some of these different features that we're going to go over today. Quick introduction, my name's Cody. I'm a product manager here at Synology, and I'll be your guide for this time around. Now to begin, we're going to go over our agenda for today's session. Now it's going to be a little bit of a different format than some of our other webinars because we're going to be focusing on mainly security, and we're going to divide this up into 4 different areas. Starting off with system security, moving into data security, then network security, and rounding things off with user security and controls you can put in place on your Synology NAS. So moving on into section 1 for system security. So in terms of system security, what we really mean is making sure your Synology NAS is up to date, notifying you, and you're using the proper settings to make sure everything stays healthy. Now, one of the main things you want to do is enable some sort of auto update for your operating system DSM on the NAS. Now, you can set this to actually do just the latest security updates, the latest version of DSM, or you can completely bypass it and just be notified that there is indeed an update. We recommend at least making sure that you have auto updates for the latest security patches. You also want to make sure you're subscribed to the Synology newsletter, which you can do on your Synology account on the Synology.com website. This will keep you informed on changes coming to the Synology ecosystem in the future. Next, you want to actually enable notifications, and you can do so for email, text, or push notifications to your device. Now, this is going to let you have notifications for system events, like if there's an update, for example, if there's other errors going on with maybe hard drive health, for example. Lastly, you want to make sure you deploy an uninterruptible power supply or UPS. Now, this is not just a surge protector, this is a battery backup for your NAS and other critical systems you might want to run off of this battery backup. What's great about this solution is in the event of a power outage, the battery power will kick on and the Synology NAS can continue running for a period of time. Now, if that battery runs out after a specified period of time, the Synology NAS can unmount your actual volumes on your system and then perform a graceful shutdown when that battery does actually run out. Now, if the power comes back on before that battery starts to deplete to that level, then of course the Synology NAS will just kick on back to normal power and everything just keeps running. So let's go ahead and check this out. So here we are on our main Synology NAS for today, and we're going to first actually configure automatic updates for DSM. So to do so, we're going to open up Control Panel, go to the 3rd row here for System, and go to Update and Restore, and click on the Update Settings button. Now on this menu here, you're going to be able to change some of the different update settings for DSM. We definitely recommend at least installing important updates and other things that fix critical vulnerabilities. You could also do automatic updates to install the latest version of DSM to get all of the greatest features that are going to be available in new versions. You could also notify yourself, but we definitely recommend at least doing the top option, and you can schedule these updates if you need to. Next, we're going to go into notifications and begin setting these up. You could have this applied to your Synology account and sign in at the very top, but we're going to go to another email address, the next tab down, and actually enable our Gmail address as the sender for these different notifications. So once we have this all logged in, we're going to then add recipient profiles for these different notification rules that we set, which is a new feature inside of DSM 7.2. So when we click add, we're going to be able to choose what rule these different email addresses will receive. There's some default ones for warning and critical, so I'll have the critical warnings be sent to a different email address for myself in this case. Now in the email field right below the rule option, you're going to be able to add multiple email addresses here. Again, that's a new feature inside of DSM 7.2, so you can send it to multiple different stakeholders, different teams on your IT team, and different aliases if you need to. Now once that's all applied, we have my email address receiving the critical rules for this actual environment right here. We're then going to go to the rules option on the top, that tab right here, and actually begin reviewing some of these rules. So these warning and critical rules here are actually default on the system. If you need to see what they apply to, you can click the view button right at the top, and you can see all the different notifications you would get by being a recipient of this rule. So since this is a critical rule that's default, all of the critical options you see listed here are going to be included. You'd also review the all one here. This is basically all the different notifications. You can see which ones these apply to, and of course, it's pretty much all of them in this case. Now, after you're done reviewing these other default ones, if you need to, you can also create additional new rules and have that be just specific warnings and notifications if you need to. So you can drill down in here and actually apply a custom rule set if you need to for your services. Now, after we have all those notifications set up, we can go into hardware and power and go over to UPS. This is the uninterruptible power supply option. You enable it with this checkbox and choose your UPS type. Usually either a USB or an SNMP UPS, and this information bubble will tell you the differences between all of them. Next, we want to go ahead and make sure we're subscribed to the newsletter. So to do that, we're going to go to Synology.com and actually sign in to our Synology account. Now, once we do so, we're going to be greeted with the main overview page for our Synology account on Synology.com. You're going to see some different devices with their serial numbers paired to the Synology account, for example, and any other things that you might need to do in terms of security. On the left-hand side, you're going to see you have other details about your profile, devices, maybe some subscriptions you're actually subscribed to in C2, for example, and you can also get support if you don't have access to your actual NAS. Let's say it's inaccessible. But for us, we're going to go up to the icon on the top right and go to Manage Profile. Once this loads, you want to go down to the Preferences card. It's the third one down here. And whenever you click Edit, you're going to be able to actually subscribe to all the different newsletters and also other notifications for other applications. So you'll actually see that I'm not subscribed to the Cloud Solutions newsletter, so I'm going to want to do that because I have some C2 services I'm subscribed to. And likely the security advisories, I want to make sure I get the cloud services for that also. We're going to hit Apply, and then that means we're going to have all of the different newsletters and information Synology wants to send us. Moving on to Section 2 for data security. For data security, what we mean is actually taking care of your storage media and the data that will reside upon your storage media, like your hard drives or your SSDs. So first, you want to make sure you use a redundant RAID type because drive failures happen and SSDs have a specified lifespan. So you want to use a redundant RAID like RAID 1, 5, 6, 10, Synology Hybrid RAID 1 or 2, or Synology RAID F1, which is specifically for SSDs. You also want to make sure you're scheduling smart testing for your drives, which will provide insights. You can set this to be quarterly or even monthly, depending on the policies for your organization, and it will give you valuable insights into the health of your drives, like bad sector counts on a hard drive, for example. Next, for your actual data that resides on the storage media, you want to enable data checksum for your shared folders where your files and other media will actually reside. You can actually keep data healthy by preventing bit rot using this checksum, and that's all thanks to Synology's file system, which is BTRFS. Next, now that you have data on your Synology NAS, you want to make sure you're using some combination of our backup suite, like snapshot replication or a backup program like Hyper Backup that Synology offers. This will help protect against ransomware as well as human errors which are inevitable in a business setting. Next, you want to also take a look at some of our new data security features that are available in DSM 7.2. There's write once, read many storage, and also immutable snapshots. We just had a webinar on these two different new features not too long ago, so go ahead and check that out for more information. We will be briefly touching on immutable snapshots in a moment. There's also volume encryption, which allows you to encrypt everything on the volume on your Synology NAS, from shared folder data all the way to LUNs and even package files on top of that. So let's check it out. So here we are on our main Synology NAS, and we're going to begin actually building out our RAID array. Keep in mind we're on a 2-bay device to start. We'll move into a larger one in a little bit to discuss some other features. But for this 2-bay device, that'll influence our RAID array selection. So what we're going to do first is actually move into our storage manager. So what we're going to do is go to our main menu and actually select the storage manager. And since we don't already have a storage pool created, it'll automatically open up this wizard to make you actually set that up. So we're going to choose RAID 1 for our RAID array to give us that redundancy in case one of our drives fails. We're going to select our drives and continue on with the wizard. We're going to add all of the space we can to this volume size. We're going to select our file system, BTRFS of course, and we're going to go ahead and click continue. And this will start building out your RAID array. And so we're going to let that finish. In the meantime, we're going to move over to a separate Synology NAS to show you some of the other new features inside of DSM 7.2. So this is a more modern, brand new NAS in our lineup, a DS3622 XS Plus. If we go to create another volume in this case, this device actually supports encrypted volumes. So we're going to add another volume that will be on storage pool 2 since it has some extra space. And we're going to be able to encrypt this volume. And this includes all the data on the volume from your files to your package data and even LUNs on top of that. We'll type in our encryption key for our vault, and once this is all finished, we'll be able to create this encrypted volume. Again, we're going to let this all build out on our main Synology NAS, and we'll come back and actually set up other testing and checksum in just a moment. Next, what we're going to do is enable smart testing for the Synology drives that are installed on our Synology NAS. To do so, we're going to stay in Storage Manager and go over to the HDD and SSD tab on the left-hand pane, and we're going to go to Settings and actually go to Test Scheduler. Once we hit Create, we're going to begin setting up this specific test. We're going to do an extended test to get the most insights possible, and you can have this test all supported drives or just specific ones, especially useful if you're staggering your testing on your drives over time. Now under Schedule, you're going to be able to schedule these tests up to a month, every 3 months, 6 months, etc. You want to set this to be reflective of your internal company policies. So we do probably 3 or 1 month in our case. Now what we're going to do is go over to our control panel and begin setting up our shared folder with data checksum. We're going to go to Control Panel, go to the Shared Folder tab, and hit Create. We've gone over this many times in Synology Partner Online trainings in the past, so we'll breeze through this a bit. We're going to name this folder File Server in our case. And on the next screen, you're going to be able to protect this folder with shared folder encryption or even worm technology. We went over worm storage in a previous webinar, so if you need more information on that, go ahead and check that webinar out. So we're going to just skip these for today. Next, on this next page, you can enable the checksum that we've been mentioning. So you want to enable this top checkbox, which helps give you advanced data integrity using the file system BTRFS's own technology built into the system. Now, once we've finished with this wizard, this file server shared folder is available for usage. If we expand the file server shared folder in Control Panel, you'll be able to see what kind of settings are applied to the shared folder, so you can verify that data integrity protection is enabled. Next, now that we have file server data actually on the Synology NAS, we want to make sure we have backups available for the system. We have a whole suite of Synology backup solutions installed on this platform. We're going to be focusing on snapshot replication and hyper backup today. Now, in snapshot replication, under snapshots, you'll be able to set up a snapshot schedule for your shared folders. You can enable this schedule and do immutable snapshots and have a protection period from typically 7 and 14 days, but you can go up to 30 days if you need to. Again, we went over immutable snapshots at length in a previous webinar, so check that out. You also have options for replicating your data off-site to another Synology NAS if you have a secondary site and another device available. That would just be the next tab down on the left-hand side. And that would be where you can create your shared folder snapshots in that case. Lastly, you have hyper backup. You can use this platform to take your file server data and back it up offsite to a third-party cloud provider, or Synology C2, for example, giving you the most flexibility for backing up your data off of the Synology NAS system. Moving on to Section 3 for network security. With network security, you may be familiar with a lot of these different settings we're going to discuss, especially if you're trying to secure other network devices in your environment, like IP cameras, for example. With any device, like a Synology NAS, IP cameras, etc., it's always good to change your default login ports, like the login ports for DSM, your operating system, and any login ports for applications like Synology Drive. You also want to make sure you auto-block brute force login attempts for both the user accounts as well as for specific IP addresses those login attempts are coming from. After it reaches a certain threshold, you can lock down that account and ban that IP address. These excessive attempts can oftentimes reflect bot activity. You also want to make sure you implement an SSL certificate and force HTTPS connections, which helps guard against man-in-the-middle attacks, as well as make sure you have a secure connection. Next, there's also a firewall on your Synology NAS, which will help you control security over NAS traffic going to your Synology NAS. You can also implement a firewall for your network at large on top of that using another third-party component. Now, there's some other network security settings you can enable on your Synology NAS. In DSM 7.2 specifically, there's SMB auto-block to help guard against brute force attacks over a mapped network drive, for example, and also a Quick Connect global IP ban, which is actually built into Quick Connect now. So you can actually have blockage of different IP addresses through Quick Connect if they attempt to log in too many times. Lastly, you can use third-party components like a Synology router to do a VPN or some other third-party VPN device like a different firewall, for example. So let's check out some of these settings. So here we are on our Synology NAS, and we're going to enable a lot of those security settings right now. Now, we're going to move back into Control Panel because that's where a lot of these different settings live. We're going to start off in Login Portal so we can change the login portal's for different applications and DSM. So we're going to change these ports for DSM away from 5001 and 5000 to some port that makes sense for us that isn't already occupied by some other service in the system. We're also going to enable automatically redirect HTTP connections to HTTPS so that we have a secure connection, especially whenever we get that certificate enabled. Now, once we've done that, we're going to move over to the Applications tab. This is going to be where you can change the default login ports for specific applications. This is going to be so that you can log in directly to the application rather than going through DSM. So we have File Station. This would also work for Drive, Surveillance Station, for example. So as we edit this, we can change these ports here to something that makes sense for us. And you can also add an alias for this login portal if you need to. And that address would be reflected right under this field here, as you see there. You can also set up a domain for this login portal if you wanted to, a customized domain. Once we finish all this up, we're going to move over into the Security tab on the left-hand side to begin enabling some other settings. So as we move over to the Security tab here, what we're going to do is first enable account protection. So we're going to move over to the Account option, the second tab. Now you're going to see two-factor authentication. We'll get back to that in a bit in a later demo. But under account protection, you can actually do auto block for accounts in case a specific account is getting brute forced frequently. You can have this lock it down, which is another good step for network security. Next, what we're going to do is move over to firewall to begin setting up some firewall rules. Just kind of go down the line here. So in the Firewall tab, we're going to enable Firewall and click Edit Rules and begin setting up some firewall rules in our case. Now on this main screen, it's going to be for all interfaces. If you want to get more granular, you can use this drop down to do firewall rules for specific interfaces, and that's what we're going to do. We're going to do this for LAN 1, and we're going to set up allow rules. So we're going to deny everything that doesn't match a specific rule and go ahead and hit create. Now on the screen, you're going to be able to do this for specific ports or applications. So we're going to do this for applications for the management UI for DSM, as well as, let's say, Windows File Server features. Now you can choose what you want to block, what the source IP is in our case. With this, we're going to be doing an allow rule. So we're going to do a specific IP. We're going to allow my computer to access this. But you can also do locations on top of that for geolocation for the United States or what have you. So what we're going to do is go to specific IP and set this up for my specific IP address to just allow my computer to interact with this NAS on the management ports as well as through Windows File Server, for example, since I'll be the only one using it anyway. Now, once this is all done and we hit OK, it's going to end up doing a check to make sure you didn't do any rules that will accidentally block your current system that you're interacting with the NAS on. And once that's all finished, you'll be good to go with the firewall rules. You can, of course, create many more if you need, depending on your use case. Now, under protection, this is going to be where you enable auto block. Now, this is going to be auto blocking IP addresses that try to brute force into your NAS too many times. And you can do that at the very top. And there's also denial of service protection as well. Just enable it with the checkbox. Lastly, we're going to go ahead and add our certificate. Now, we're going to use Let's Encrypt in this case. So we're going to add our certificate, go through the process of adding our Let's Encrypt certificate information, and we're going to let it do its full authentication. Lastly, we're going to change the certificate settings so that DSM actually uses this new certificate that we want it to use. And now that this is all completed, you've enabled many of the different network security options that are available on your Synology NAS. Moving on to Section 4 on user security. User security settings are some of the most important settings in your Synology NAS because the users themselves are oftentimes utilized as an attack vector for gaining access to your data. You want to first enable file operations logging so that you can monitor data access patterns for audit, which is a requirement for HIPAA-compliant deployments, so make sure you enable that. You also want to require two-factor authentication for all users, helping to solidify user login security by requiring essentially two components to log in. You also want to design password strength rules to stop users from using simple passwords, like the word password, a series of numbers, etc. You also want to make sure you install antivirus and use Security Advisor built into the Synology NAS. This helps mitigate known threats and allows you to automatically find any settings you may have missed whenever you've been enabling a lot of these other security settings. There's some other security features that are available in DSM-7 and DSM-7.2 respectively. One of those being Secure Sign-In, which allows you to use a one-time password, approved sign-in, a hardware security key, or even Windows Hello and macOS Touch ID to log into the system. With DSM 7.2, you also have adaptive MFA, which allows admin accounts to go through another authentication step when accessed from untrusted connections. So some of the adaptive MFA triggers for your admin accounts are if you're connecting to it through an unrecognized device, if you're connecting through a strange WAN connection, or again, if you have it as a password-only admin account. If you already have 2FA enabled, you would actually log in through that workflow. So to actually get this adaptive MFA login confirmation completed, you can use the Synology Secure Sign-In app, DS Finder, and if you don't have access to those apps, you can also use an email using the email address associated with that user account. So let's check out some of these features. Back on our main Synology NAS, we're going to move through actually setting up some user protections like password strength rules, as well as actually setting up file logging. So we're going to start off with that file logging. We're going to move into Control Panel, File Services, and SMB. And we're going to go to the Log Settings button. We're going to enable all these different checkboxes so that we know how and when people are actually interacting with our data. This is especially important for HIPAA compliance if that applies to you. Now, you might also be interacting with your files through FileStation and not just a mapped network drive through SMB, for example. So we're going to also open up FileStation and enable logging there. So under FileStation, we're going to go to Settings. It's a button across the top. And once there, the Enable FileStation Log button is at the very top. You're going to check this box and also hit Save here. Now, once this is all done, you have insight into how people are actually interacting with data on your system. So we're going to exit out a lot of these different menus and go back to Control Panel in this case. And we're going to set up those password strength rules. So under Control Panel, we're going to go to User and Group. We're going to go to the Advanced tab along the top. And we're going to enable a lot of these different features like force password change after the admin changes the password for you, include special characters, exclude common passwords like the word password, for example, and also do a password history, let's say 5 times, for example. But you can change that based on your internal policy needs. Now, once we've set everything, including our password history, you can also enable password expiration, essentially setting a validity period for those passwords. Now, whenever you enable password expiration, you're also able to exclude certain accounts, even admin accounts, for example. But for me, I'm going to go ahead and disable this option so that even I have to be following these specific rules. Now, once all of these different settings meet your needs and you set up notifications for password change, then you should be good to go with your password rules. I'm also going to force all users to change password at the next login because I changed a lot of these password settings and I want them all to follow it. Now that we've set up file logging as well as password rules, we're going to move into both antivirus as well as security advisor. So we're going to exit out of Control Panel because these are different modules in this case. Now, once we exit out of Control Panel, we're going to move over to the main menu and open up our antivirus, AV. So Antivirus Essentials is our AV package that's included with the Synology NAS and Packet Center. And you have the ability to do things like a system scan, a custom scan, or a full scan of the entire system. For us, we're going to schedule a full scan in the system. So once we are ready to go, we're going to move into Scheduled Scan and actually begin setting up the schedule for this AV scan. So we're going to hit Create, and as mentioned, we're going to just do a full scan. And you can have this run daily or specific days if you need to, and you can schedule it at a specific time. Once we hit OK, this schedule will run as we set it, and we will have antivirus results at that specified time each and every day in our case. Next, we're going to move to Security Advisor, and we're going to run a scan here based on a scan for work or business in our case, because that's how we're actually going to be using the Synology NAS. So we're going to choose the For Work and Business option, and we're going to let this scan run, and essentially it's going to give us any warnings if we miss some settings during this whole process. For example, server signing, and you can actually change the setting in advanced settings under SMB, and you can force this setting to help clear this warning here. So that's how you set up some of the different user account protections. We'll be back in just a second to actually set up things like 2FA for our users. So what we're going to do next is actually go ahead and set up our two-factor authentication for all of our users. So to do so, we're going to open up the Control Panel once more, and we're going to go to Security right here and go to the Account tab. Just like before, you're going to be able to see some of the things like account protection, etc. And this is where the adaptive MFA settings also live. But we're going to enable two-factor authentication for all users in our case. When we hit Apply, we'll have an option to set this up now, and we'll go through this wizard as well. So what we're going to do first is download the Synology Secure Sign-In app using your App Store for Apple or Google Play, of course. And once you have that, you're going to be able to scan this QR code in the app and then type in your one-time password here. And once you do that, your device is now paired back to Secure Sign-In and can be used to log in to to your Synology NAS using two-factor authentication. So once we're all done with this wizard, we're going to go ahead and click Done and close out of some of these menus here. Now, one thing I wanted to point out is all of these settings actually exist under the person icon and under Personal. And if you go to the Security tab here, you're going to be able to change some of your two-factor authentication settings. Now, if we actually click on the two-factor authentication button, we're going to type in our password, of course, and we can also change some other settings here, like being able to do approve sign-in for specific devices, add a hardware security key like Windows Hello or macOS Touch ID, a YubiKey, etc., and you can do so in this menu. Now that we have all of these settings implemented on our Synology NAS, we have taken many steps to secure this device for access. So we went over quite a bit today. Let's go ahead and recap and go over some next steps. In today's session, we went over many different security features available on your Synology system, from system, data, network, to even user-level security. Now keep in mind that your organization may need to meet different internal policies or other compliance regulations, so that could change some of the settings you saw here today. If you need help past what this webinar provided, go ahead and check out our Synology Partner online training page. There's hours and hours of video content there. And also check out our knowledge base. There's step-by-step guides on all kinds of Synology packages there. On top of that, if you need help past what those resources provide too, go ahead and send us an inquiry, and our highly trained inquiry team will get your questions answered. Business users, of course, reach out if you have your own internal IT team to onboarding@synologyamerica.com, and we can get you some additional help. On top of that, channel partners and resellers, go ahead and reach out to sac_sales@synology.com, and we can get you in touch with your technical account manager. And lastly, if you have some UK offices or clients, go ahead and reach out to our UK team at uk_sales@synology.com. And with that said, thank you so much for tuning in, and we will see you next time.